What's going on, CypherCon? How you guys doing? Come on, guys. How you guys doing? This is the 6th CypherCon. You guys know what this hand symbol means here? This what? Because you said because the convention slaps. Is that what you said? That's a pretty good guess. Any other guesses? 6 fingers. Yeah, exactly. There's 6 fingers on there, and that's an esoteric symbol for those scholars in the audience. It's been around, and I heard that when they first made CypherCon, the first year they were using the 6 fingers and a bunch of different symbols all around, and they did that because when they reached the 6th year of CypherCon, then they would actually deem it a success. So you are all here at a success. So give yourselves a round of applause for that. Yeah. A little backstory on that. But my name is Cullah, and I'm here to talk about Web3. Anyone ever heard of this concept? Web3? I'm assuming the folks that are here. So people, I don't know, yeah, for a show of hands, crypto, Web3, blockchain, force for good, raise your hand. Force for good? Force for bad? Okay, we got a couple. And I'm assuming the rest of you have no idea. Or maybe you have some idea, but willing to be convinced. Let's see. Okay. So what I'm here to talk about is not just about crypto and Web3, but more so about how it can be applied to the creator economy. So for another show of hands, who here is a creative or a creator, like music or visual arts or? Okay, so the same people. That's good. All right, so we're gonna get into it, how this whole revolution is gonna change creativity forever. There. So a little bit about me first, just to give you some context as to who I am and why I'm actually here in some fashion, in some sense of authority to talk about this stuff. So I am the co-founder of Firebird Media, which is this guy right here. We're a brand new bootstrap startup, just a few people. And our goal is to accelerate the dawn of a decentralized creator economy. And we're gonna get into all that, what that means. And essentially we have a protocol and a bunch of tools that are gonna help jumpstart that. I'm also the founder of NFT MKE. Who here has heard of NFT MKE? All right. Deep in the audience. We're rolling deep here, guys. Anyone in Milwaukee, if you're interested, come down to the blockchain village. We actually have NFTs we can give out for you guys that we're going to be using for voting for our leadership council later this year. And we have a bunch of fun events that are coming up with music as well, and parties, and also low-level stuff about what are NFTs actually, and how can we use them in many different applications. And I guess got to throw some hacker street cred out there. It's been a while. I'm mostly in music now, but when I was in high school, I was suspended for hacking into the network, whatever that meant to them. I essentially just double-clicked and used Java, which I was allowed to in my AP computer science class to do things. And the administration was quite upset, and they found out that we were maybe planning some things, but we never ended to do anything malicious, but they were kind of caught with their britches down when the breeches are up, you know what I mean? And also, in high school, I was able to successfully hand in a science project late by spoofing the email header of the date of the email header to be a week prior. So I turned in a late homework assignment, totally got the full credit and everything. But this is not possible now. This was only possible, I think this was in 2007 or 2008. Most email clients would just be like, oh yeah, that's the date, sure, makes sense. But now there's much more shenanigans going on. So I just had to include that because I do have a little hacker cred. I did study computer engineering at Marquette as well. But mostly what I've been doing for the past I'd say almost 10 years now, as I've been primarily being a musician. And being deep into the hacker world and in the internet culture, I found these things called open source systems, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And I thought that this might be a great way, a great model to apply to my own creative assets. And growing up in that type of community, I seeked out private torrent sites, and I seeked out these open licensing places and used them to distribute my music. And I didn't try to fight them. I actually found kind of my home in these places. And so over the years, I've released 16 albums each year. I've been releasing it, so it's been now over 50% of my life. 2021 was my 15th album, my 30th birthday. Different genres that span from folk music to electronic music to hip hop music, all types of things. And because I embrace these open licensing frameworks, I've gotten this music placed in over 10,000 productions, whether it's on YouTube or short films or even advertisements like North Face, and for movies like Expendables 4, and video games like Car Mechanic Simulator 2018. Anyone know that one? Yeah, okay. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were like, oh my God, Car Mechanic Simulator? Yep, 2018, there's a whole radio station that's my entire library. It's like hours and hours of my music. And of course, Those Who Remain, and there's also Stickman Rope Hero, if anyone's ever heard of that one. Also, a little fun thing in there is I'm the grandson of Dick and Nancy Wolf, who hold the Guinness Book of World Record for the largest family band, totaling 19 people. So my grandpa and grandma had 17 children, and they formed a family band. And they toured around the Midwest. And we just created a YouTube channel for all the archives. We have some CNN videos, some Milwaukee videos, some Chicago videos, and even Pat Robertson, who knows those people. You can assume that all these kids, they didn't play sacred and religious music. They played big band music, a lot of hits from the 30s and 40s, but also they'd play some rock and roll and stuff too. But so music is very much a part of who I am, and I actually was raised under the tradition that music is a sacred act for performance and for creativity, is not just a thing for business, but is a sacred act. And so I felt that that kind of meshed with this open source idea of sharing the things that I feel, my contributions to the world. Why would I limit that? It didn't make any sense to me why someone would spend so much time putting up barriers between people and their music. It didn't make any sense. So then we get into this idea of the creator economy. And this is a new-ish term that has been coming around. As you can see in 2021, yet the numbers of 2022 still waiting for them. We don't know if this is a COVID anomaly or of sorts, but we know that this economy is just, this might be where it reaches that parabolic moment. And this is all of YouTube and Twitch and OnlyFans and Patreon and all those things. You got one to plug? No. We don't want to see that. But the idea is this is quite an emerging market, because everyone and their grandma is becoming an influencer and a content creator, more specifically. As technology has become democratized, we all have, well, I don't have my phone, but we all have a phone that is now being utilized to make Grammy-winning records. I believe Kendrick Lamar and his, To Pimp a Butterfly album, one of those songs was tracked through an iPhone, at least partially. I'm sure it wasn't mixed and mastered in there, but anyway. The point being, in order to make an album of that type of caliber only 50 years ago, only 20 years ago, you're talking about significant difference of amount of money that you have to spend. The amount that you would have to spend for Abbey Road for a Beatles record and to distribute this vinyl in the whole world, and to manage all that and keep track of all that accounting, and talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of engineering and multiple engineers. Now you can just say, Alexa, record this, So this is very exciting for me, at least, as a creator, to see that this is becoming so large. So who here has heard of Web 2.0 or Web 2, maybe? Or maybe you guys know the Web 1, or we call it the dot-com boom, right, or the dot-com era. Who here was old enough to remember that? Been through it. Yeah, been through it. People got yachts and people got not yachts. And it happens every time. And Web 2 is no different. And what we saw in Web 2 was really the rise of platforms. In the 2000s, we start seeing user-generated content on MySpace. We got some musicians that were blowing up on MySpace, like the great Wisconsin native Bon Iver. Maybe you've heard of him. A lot of his big breaks at the beginning was through being discovered through MySpace. And all of a sudden now we see these new platforms that are using the technology to generate their own creative assets. Like one of the first deals that I ever signed was with this company out of London called Carbon Logic. And they used a website built on Flash, RIP, that was essentially crowdsourcing all their music for synchronization and for publishing deals. So they would just create this organic, this platform for communities to be built. I put my music on there, and they reached out and said, hey, we really like this song. Would you want to cut a deal? I said, sure, I'm only 16, but I'll sign it anyway. And then I got my first dollar from music. Well, it was a British pound, but I went to the bank and cashed it, and the lady said, it's only going to be like 20 cents after the conversion and after the fees. I said, I don't care. Give me that 20 cents. Looking back, I think I probably should have kept it. But in the 2010s, we started to see the influencers. So we start to see a lot more advanced platforms starting to involve, and we start to see these influencers becoming kind of these channels and these real big money makers for these platforms. And then in the late 2010s, it started to be, then we started to see more direct monetization. Like we start to see Patreon, we start to see Substack, we start to see things like that where people are using then these platforms to funnel in new fans into their own ways to direct consumer. And so that's kind of the Web 2. Web 2 was essentially we can start to read and write both. It's not just looking at the web and consuming, it's, okay, now we can create content, we can distribute it through these platforms, and then finally we were starting to get ways, okay, maybe now we can do direct monetization. And I'm sure we've all heard of these platforms, right? Like I mentioned some of them before. Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Snapchat, TikTok, WordPress, Twitter, I'm sure you all know and have used and have probably at least half a dozen of these apps on your phone right now. And so this is what runs the creator economy right now. These are the people in charge. These are the people that make that they control the means in which this money and these content gets consumed, gets distributed, and they really have the lock and key into a lot of the algorithms. We've all heard of the algorithms. I know I have to fight the algorithm every day. Every morning I put on my shoes, and I look over to my girlfriend. I say, I've got to fight the algorithms. And I put them up. She goes, go give them hell. True story. But we got problems with these. We got problems with these platforms, guys. Some major problems. This is a problem that we see in not just the creator economy and not just in these certain platforms like YouTube. This is a chart of the number of channels with a certain amount of subscribers, and then the actual number of subscribers. So what we're seeing here is essentially a high concentration of subscribers to only 10 people. So we're really seeing what is called a power law, and we see this in economics a lot. We see this in we've all heard of the 99%, the 99%, and the 1%. That's kind of that whole idea, is this power law that we see in economics. And And this is a problem in a lot of ways. I mean, the obvious reasons are it starts to be a feedback loop. We start to see someone like Mr. Beast, who's exploded recently, and because he's doing well, YouTube and all these platforms reinforce it, and because that's where their money's made, and that they just keep reinforcing and reinforcing it, and there's very little incentive for them to look down and discover new artists, because now they have to take higher risks, and they have to take more resources, and especially with something like Spotify, where streaming in the music industry is already really narrow, thin margins in the streaming world, they're going to take the bet. They're going to take the bet on that big artist. And this is also known as the celebrity effect. We see it in psychology. It's also there also is a power law in that. It's a similar concept. Oh, have you heard of this person? Oh, I've heard of them. Okay, you'll already, those barriers between you consuming it or purchasing some sort of ticket or a song or whatever, or a video or their Patreon, you will, as a consumer, are much more likely to. So there are also psychological reinforcements to this power law. And so we see this really, to me, this is indicative of what we know as centralization of authority, or centralization of economic and political value and power. So these small amounts of people end up being the ones with the most amount of power. And is this right? Is this the right way to do it? I don't know. I'm not the philosophizer in that way, and I'm not an economist. But when I look at it, because I'm not one of those 10, I go, this isn't right. This isn't right, man. But I'm sure that the platforms think differently. I'm sure that all the folks that are on the teams of those 10 people, all the people that they employ, which is essentially what they are, is they are in themselves their own media empires using these platforms. So that's the power law. And I say I'm not an economist, but Herman Daly is. And when I start to think of things where we see this concentration of power and concentration of wealth and stuff, it really, to me, shows a lack of control of the average individual in these platforms that are consumed by everyone. And so Herman Daly says a lack of control by the individual over the institutions, that not only affects his life but determines his livelihood, and in fact is an excellent training in the acceptance of totalitarianism. So then that brings up that question, are we all just being trained and vetted with these types of platforms for them to just keep reinforcing this ability for us as individuals not to really have that control and power that we might need in order to work together, in order to fulfill our creative potential, right? Now we're fighting algorithms, like I said, and not getting up and getting to work and actually finding the creativity in each of us, and we're focused much more on how do these platforms work? How do they want us to do it? Like, for example, I'm a big album guy. Like I said, I have 16 albums that I used to release them all at once. One album, here it is, here's the album. But with the rise of Spotify, now they want me to release a song a month. And luckily I have all these songs, and so I'm starting to release instrumentals. So I have a song a month, sure, okay, I'll release the instrumentals, and I have new songs every so often, and I do it, but it's changed my model, and now I have to think and I have to spend all this time on these platforms. And honestly, my fans don't care. They get confused. They only care because they use Spotify, and that's how they consume it. So if it were up to just me and them, which I still do, we could release the album and give it to them, but they still use Spotify. So some people might be interested. So we find this divide here between the individual, the independent creator, and how they work with each other. And of course, a looming threat of us actually accepting potentially these authoritarian models without us even knowing. Just being trained bit by bit. Okay, yeah, give up a little bit more of our autonomy, give up a little bit more of our creative potential in order to satisfy the institutions. Is that right? Yeah, okay. And then now we enter into Web3, from platforms to protocols. So I mentioned before, Firebird Media, what I'm building there, is a protocol. And that's just really, in its definition, I mean, I'm sure people here are very familiar with the Internet Protocol and the Transport Control Protocol, a bunch of other protocols, the COVID-19 protocols. And so what we see is essentially the great things about platforms and Web 2 is fantastic things that happen. We're able to distribute our production. We're able to have more personalized consumption. We're able to connect with each other globally. These are all awesome things. Really great. But now when we enter into Web 3, we start talking about decentralization. We start talking about self-sovereignty. So we're seeing distributed ownership as well. The interoperable identity between many different people working together in order to create assets. And then we can create standards for contracts and licenses and all this stuff. And so this is a little high level. I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of what this means actually here. Like I said, Web3 is all about economic sovereignty. It's about you being the owner of your assets and having the control over it, not forfeiting it to a platform, forfeiting it to a centralized authority. You can have the freedom and choice to do it if you'd like. There's no reason you shouldn't. There's no reason you couldn't go and accept that deal with a large platform if that makes sense to you. But likely they're going to take all of the ownership of your intellectual property. And I know, and the music industry is a perfect example where this happens every day. There's another quote I almost did by Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas guy. What's his name? Hunter S. Thompson. He has a scathing quote about the music industry and about the music business, about them being murderers and thieves and pimps. And it's the music industry is a long plastic hallway, and it's just all just a bunch of nonsense. So the Web 1 really was, so if we follow the chain here, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, Web 1 is really like, oh wow, we can make a page with HTML. Amazing. I can look up the yellow pages. I can go to pets.com, see some cute pets. That's pretty cool. Never had that before. And then when Web 2 came, then all of a sudden we could read and write. So now all of a sudden we can put applications on this. And that's what we started to get Facebook and YouTube and all those types of things. Now we can actually program, have an application layer that can do a little bit more. And so now Web 3, we can read, we can write, and we can own. So in the Web 1 and Web 2, you see the circle in the middle, those are people exchanging their information. But yet as soon as they distribute them and exchange it, a lot of times some of these terms, if anyone's ever read the Instagram terms of service or read any of these terms of service of some of these big platforms, it says in a lot of these pretty clearly that they have the right to take this stuff and use it however they like. So in Web 3, all of a sudden now your creativity, your creative output is now tied to you as an owner through economic sovereignty. So you become your own bank, you become your own label, you become your own publisher, you become sovereign over your own, you become responsible for your own sovereignty. So some folks here might be familiar with this little abstraction here, the OSI or the OSI, right? So I took that and kind of slapped what our protocol is on top there. So we at Firebird Media are built on Cardano blockchain. Anyone here ever heard of Cardano? Yeah? Anyone a fan of Charles Hoskinson? Yes. Yeah, me too. Yeah, we're very fascinated with the architecture, and I'm not going to get into necessarily all about that, but what Cardano allows us to do is to have governance and smart contracts and computation and settlement all at our fingertips. So all of a sudden now we have access to this internet computer where we have a set of open standards for lending, for borrowing, for distributing assets, for licensing, for contracts, for all these different types of things out of the box. And then we can build on top of that. And we can create new novel ways. For example, Floorless, which is my co-founder's protocol that he's building for NFT marketplaces. So he's building essentially the architecture for the new generation of e-commerce, is another way to look at it, where we can put 10,000 transactions into one. You can have your creative asset shipped to 1,000 stores in one click, with all different parameters. You can compress all this stuff off chain. And of course, instant settlements, more or less. He keeps telling me to stop saying instant. Compared to the bank, it's instant. Compared to, if anyone here a musician has ever dealt with a synchronization deal, it's instant. By comparison, let's say. I'm still waiting for some sync money from 2 years ago. And these are established professionals. This is just the nature of the business. So the fact that we can send an asset, I mean, downstairs I sent a bunch of NFTs today. They come in within a minute. And that's no bank telling us what to do. There's no label that's there telling me what I need, what I can and can't do, because I'm the one with the sovereignty. I'm the one who can decide. Essentially what we're doing on the stack is we're connecting the creator, the audience, these platforms and communities with our STEM mixer DApp. And so who here knows what a DApp is? What does it called? Decentralized application. Yeah, so essentially it's like an application on your phone, but it uses decentralized protocols. The people that use this protocol, the people that you can, to just get a picture of how this ecosystem works with the users. We have the creator, the content creator, which we all know, someone like me, someone like all the people that raised their hands, the people that are creating these things. And then there's the communities and platforms that can build on top of this protocol. And then there's the audience that's consuming it, and then there's the operators. And the operators is very generic, but this could be a validator. This could be a stake pool operator. It could be a crypto miner. It could be, there's even some folks that are experimenting with jury systems where folks can, there's this thing in the music industry called DCMA, right? There's a DMCA. DMCA, the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. And it's not, and it's purely for millennials. If you're not a millennial, it doesn't apply to you. No, just kidding. It applies to everybody. It's the law. But what that does is essentially allow for your community to become jurors or to have a stake in actually helping kind of settle some of these issues. Someone says, hey, that's my song. Okay, well, we can get some machine learning, we can get some people, and we can get them together, and if they put in some effort, they can actually get some rewards. They can actually get paid for their effort. Another example of this is that we might all know is a Spotify playlist curator. Right, so I'm sure everyone here who uses Spotify has used some sort of playlist, or maybe you've made your own. But playlists on Spotify are the holy grail for musicians, to get on the editorial playlists for Spotify, the ones with 10 million views, 10 million listeners. If you're on that, you're set. You get on one with 100,000, it's okay. You get like $100 or something, a few $100 maybe if you're lucky. But in the current system, the way Spotify works, and this is just you can kind of use this as an analog for every other platform uses a similar type of thing when we're talking about the algorithms, right? In Spotify, if you're an independent playlist curator, you're spending all this time finding the most up-and-coming music, the awesome music that's coming. And Spotify keeps track of everyone and what they're adding to their playlists. And they know who are the people who know the new acts before they do. And so then they can prioritize these people as tastemakers, as people, as more valuable individuals, and they can use their curating skills and just take it. Say, oh, all that time that you're spending on those playlists, thanks. You don't get any money. Actually, you pay us for the privilege to make these playlists. So in a Web3 world, those curators, they can be a part of a community, they could be part of a platform, they could be an operator, they can be actually engaging in this protocol and getting something back. So we can define so many different types of roles in this economic system. So then we get to the fun stuff, the features of our protocol. And like I said, we're a brand new startup, and these are what we're aiming for. And some of the stuff we already have in the works, some of it we're still working on, some of it's built in. And I'm gonna breeze through it. The first one here is licensing in smart contracts. So I mentioned about how I embraced these open licensing platforms and frameworks, and I was able to get this fan base and get placements in all these video games and TV shows and stuff by sharing it. By doing that, I actually lost. It was a cost-benefit analysis. There was many situations when some folks could have given some money, or could have given something, or maybe they didn't even follow the license. Like, for example, you guys remember Jersey Shore? People have fond memories. Maybe you remember JWoww as one of them, maybe. The folks that don't know, congrats. Well, JWoww created this movie called The Mint after her fame at Jersey Shore. And it was all about a struggling record label that was trying to get back on its feet. And they used 12 of my songs. They used the wrong license. They gave me credit incorrectly. Didn't even ask me. Didn't even reach out. And put in the wrong license, like in the credits, using it incorrectly, clearly stating them using it wrong. Now, with licensing and smart contracts on a Web3 creator protocol, these things can be enforced by an independent validator, essentially a piece of code that you can put on the blockchain, and when NFTs go through it, or if someone tries to access a song, it has to go through that independent validator. And that validator can say, hey, you can use it like this, you can use it like this, you can use it like that. Someone can say, oh, well, that checks out for me, okay, boom. And then we can actually enforce that. And another great example I try to give people is you can still embrace, like, with these types of independent validators, giving music is another example. There's this thing called step deals in the music industry. I'm sure it's in other industries as well, and by the same or other names. And what this essentially means is you can use my song for free until or if this reaches a certain level of volume of sales, or this reaches a certain dollar amount, then we can put in another agreement that says, okay, well, now you got to give me 5%. So this is an example of how we can really customize how people can interact with each other. For example, if someone's going to make a remix, and we're going to get into remixes here in a second. Someone wants to open up their music for a remix. That actually can incentivize people to then share their content. They can build community around their assets. And all of a sudden now we have visual artists, musicians, people who are already collaborating. They're already doing this. Now we can just keep track of what are the actual rights of usage. What actually is allowed. We can keep this on chain, and then we can slowly move bit by bit of these contracts into these independent validators. The creator portal is the place where creators will be able to go, upload their music. They'll be able to access a global registration of all the assets that are utilizing our protocol. They'll be able to go and browse. Oh, hey, I'm a YouTuber. I want some songs that I know this person's given me the ability to do this. Okay, well, let me just search by, okay, boom. Oh, here are all these songs. Okay, now I can use them. Or, hey, I'm looking for a bass track. I know I can play drums, but I need a nice bass track. Oh, this bass track, this is amazing. $50, okay. I'll buy it for $50, boom, happens. They just do it peer-to-peer. There's no subscription gating. There's no agency that actually purchased those assets, or they have exclusive assets and they just have music farms of musicians and they just hire them to make generic, boring music, and you're paying this crazy fee. Get it? Nope. We're going to do it peer-to-peer. And then, of course, all the beautiful things about Cardano allowing for this reliable payments, like I mentioned, about still waiting for this synchronization money, still waiting for some of these payments. It's, man, I mean, there could be hours and hours and hours and hours of how dysfunctional the music industry is when it comes to music royalties. And then the really interesting thing for me is this collaborative economy, because then when we have these decentralized creative protocols where people can come together of different artistic mediums and work together, essentially they have this piece of intellectual property that they all contributed to, right? And now we're able to have this instant tokenized pool of equity that where people, then they can decide to do what they want, and they can say, actually, I own 25%, you own 50%, he owns the other 25%. We don't need lawyers to come up with this crap. We don't need them to go and bark down someone's tree and try to enforce this, focus all this money on enforcement. No, they can actually incentivize collaboration, where then they can just come together, and then whenever that gets sold, whenever that gets utilized by the smart contract, they just get paid. And there's no one waiting for the money. There's no one saying, oh yeah, no, I'll ping them. Yeah, I pinged them last week, I'll ping them again, I guess. It's like, oh yeah, 3 years. Yeah, well, it's not that usual. 3 years. And then what you can do is then you can have this example like a big DJ or electronic artist could release their music, and they could have their community then build on top of it, and they can still retain all their ownership. They can still decide, yeah, I mean, I still want 50% of everything. Sure. If that person allows them to be part of this song and allows them to be part of it, they could get pinged and say, hey, someone made a remix. They could listen to it. Oh, yeah, that's sweet. Let's put it on the album. Click. All of a sudden now that new artist is in the official album or on the collection, and vice versa. Some big artist could go and take, oh, hey, I really like what this independent artist is doing. I'm going to make a remix of it. And that independent artist can have all of their value and all of that stuff defined beforehand. And then we can create essentially a much more frictionless collaborative spirit, which we find all the time in the open source communities, and we find all the time in the musical communities, but we just never had the technology to really enforce this without these giant centralized authorities, and just getting worse and worse. So we need this. So what we're building first, I mentioned about stems, and so who here is familiar with STEM? Yeah, it's an industry term in the music in music for the isolated mixer track of a song. So what that means is like just a bass track, like your favorite song, just the bass by itself, or just the drums. Like, you see that band outside? There's a mixer that all of them go into, And each of those stems is just one of those channels. So essentially what you can do, and this is what we're doing with our stem mixer, is I've my 16th album called Firebird has 4 songs, and each of them have about 5 stems each. One's like a folk song, one's a blues rock song, one's a electronic song, and the other one's like a neo-soul song. And they all have different types of instruments and different types of things. And so what we're doing is we're reaching out to all these different artists and communities in order to contribute their own remixes and their own pieces of artwork. And then now we can sell an album together and use each other's platforms all in one and collaborate together. And then these individual communities can turn around and bring it to all the people within their communities and do the same exact thing. Incentivize creativity as a utility. And so this stem mixer DAC, we're calling it an automatic collaborator tool, because what it does is it solves those issues of ownership, solves those issues with licensing, which is such a big issue, which didn't really touch too much, but for those who are familiar with licensing, maybe with software, you can imagine maybe how licenses are with music. So many different places and ways to license these things. And then, of course, the royalties can be split. The beautiful thing about blockchain, and particularly Cardano, it has this very unique, I don't know what, accounting model, I think is what it's called, the extended UTXO model. It's extended upon the Bitcoin accounting model. And with the power of that, we already have, we've tested it, we haven't put it in live, but we can split up to 2,000 owners. We can give royalties to 2,000 things. And we can keep track of it as derivatives happen. You can make a derivative of a derivative, so you can make a cover of a remix of a cover and keep going down the chain, and it all gets, all the validator can understand it recursively. And I don't know what a cover of a remix of a cover of a remix looks like, but as you can imagine, that's a lot of paperwork, and that's a lot of issues for publishers and publishing performance rights agent organizations and other folks to try to make sense of all that. Good luck. It's already hard enough. So we're trying to make that automatic. We want to embrace this collaborative spirit. And this is something that I've been releasing open source music. I've kind of glossed that at the beginning of those albums I made. I've been releasing all the stems of my music for 16 years. There's over 150 songs. I've been doing this, and no one really cared or understood. Some people be like, "Oh yeah, sweet." Open source people, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's great," but the average person didn't really understand. I mean, people in the remix culture, like in hip hop and electronic, they get it. They know what stems are, but they don't know and they understand there's power there, but they know that they're pretty helpless for enforcing these things to even. I couldn't tell you how many times I've talked to a band and asked them who owns the songs, and they have a blank stare. They don't even know what that means. They don't even know what it means. They're just like, what? I wrote it, I guess, but I'm like, wait, but he played the bass. I'm like, well, who owns it? So we're trying to make it easier. Yeah, there's 3 tiers of customer segments that we think that could benefit from this, and they all have unique different ways of, and I've kind of already touched on this, and I think I'm gonna just keep it moving. Yeah, I didn't get the memo on the screen placement here, but this is where we're at with Firebird. So we're brand new. We have a website, and we're developing our app, and we're within the next month. We're going to be there in New York. If anyone's there, from April 10th to April 17th, we're going to be popping around to all different places, as well as being really, really aggressive with this early adopter program for the STEM mixer to try and find all the best communities and artists that want to participate in this little experiment. And there's a lot of benefits that can come from that too. So if anyone knows anyone in the Cardano ecosystem or in just blockchain in general, or doesn't even need to be, maybe they're curious, feel free to reach out. If you're a creator, let us know, because we're really curious as to how people want to use this, and And we're just going to have a nice, fun little experiment. But by the end of the year, you know, we're planning to have our whole white paper done, our protocol fully defined in terms of what it's going to be, some basics of our tokenomics. You know, I mentioned a little bit about the different users and how they might work. We need some tokens for that. But anyway, so I'll leave you on another quote here. So, we can go on as we are, heading towards greater political and economic chaos, or we can work to achieve systems and organizations of a size where we may regulate them, and not like what we have now. To reshape our landscapes to permit ecologically sound and locally rooted settlements. That's what distributed ledgers and distributed collaboration is all about, localization. To create for ourselves a world in which our societies, our economies, our politics are in fact in the hands of those free individuals and those diverse communities and cities that will be affected by them. A world, of course, at a human scale, not at a scale of a large authority and centralized authority, but of a human. This is a great quote by Kirkpatrick Sale. This works, Human Scale Revisited. Great work. Yeah, so I think we only have a couple minutes here. Thanks everybody for questions, if anyone's got them. Thank you so much. Any questions? The website is firebirdmedia.io. Or you can go to Twitter and it's FirebirdCNFT. Packers, get back to you. I'll get back to you, Kyle. Yeah. Yeah, so the app is our first proof of concept of our protocol. The protocol is what Firebird is. So it's an open source protocol where there's a series of smart contracts and standards to handle these licenses and intellectual properties. Well, so yeah, it's a great question. So we'll be doing transaction fees, more or less, just like a typical marketplace. We're starting off with just 2%, 2 to 3% or so for people minting them and sending them to each other and all that type of stuff, exchanging them, doing derivative works, all those types of things. But the stem mixer dApp, that when it is launched, is part of our whole Genesis token sale, and that's really a collectible NFT token sale with kind of inflated prices of collectibles, and those tokens then will be utilized later, and we have all the future value adds, stuff. So that's the primary way that we're funding this. We're all bootstrapped now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so like you mentioned, this is the thing about standards, right? Is that it's only a standard if everyone uses it, right? And that's a big challenge, right? For anyone creating a new protocol or a standard that they want to do. So, we're just trying to, like I said, our mission is to accelerate the dawn of it. So we don't know if our standard is going to be a standard that's going to be the one. We're just trying to move the needle a little bit, and it's really particularly these songs are the intellectual properties tied to an NFT that has a specific amount of metadata. And references to other NFTs and other things, and that's essentially the more proprietary nature of it. There's also an architectural standpoint with Floorless, which was in that Ozzy script, and that's really the novel way of storing this data is through Floorless, which is our partner. Yeah. Yeah. So why did I use Cardano over Ethereum? Well, yeah. So the first thing was because in Ethereum you have to whip up a smart contract and give up custody, really, of your token to the smart contract in order to actually make an NFT. It's through a smart contract. On Cardano, it has this thing called the native asset standard, where an NFT is treated the same as one ADA, which is the token. So they have almost the same infrastructure of how it's used. So it's much more, it's basically allows for liquid staking, where you can keep custody of your assets, but most of how things then get distributed are through snapshots of the chain. So you keep it, you don't have to put it in a smart contract unless you want to, unless it's going to be some advanced thing that you need to put it in a smart contract. But Cardano allows us to be able to keep your songs in your wallet, or keep your assets in your wallet, and then still allow them to be able to be to be able to be looked at and sold, bought and sold, and all this type of stuff. And of course, this idea of liquid staking, which if anyone is staking Ethereum, they know you don't actually have it. You have to give it up in order to stake it. And on Cardano, you keep it in your wallet. And so that's one fundamental architectural thing. But it's also the extended UTXO model. It's the expressive nature. I mean, there's a laundry list we can talk after. I can let you know about it. But maybe one more and we got to go. I think there was another question, or did they leave? Any other questions? What's that? Did I sue her? I mean, I don't know what there's. I mean, that was a flop of a movie, man. I don't know. It would probably be more work suing it. It was probably worth more of as a screenshot and a social media post than actually suing them. Yeah, there we go. Get the AI to start. Damn. So yeah, I mean, that's a good point though about suing, right? Suing for misusing someone's intellectual property. With our protocol, we want to disincentivize enforcement and incentivize proper collaboration. So there's too many problems with enforcement. It's such a pain. It's much better solution in our opinion to create better incentive systems, as opposed to trying to be like, put the hammer down after, or put up gates and try and, But anyway, gotta go. Thank you guys so much for your attention. Enjoy the rest of CypherCon.